Here we have a little extra demo to show you some camera adjustments that you can make. If we look over here and in this view, this is the camera view, and we have a camera move going through here, and you can see it updating over here. But let's just look at the camera view, and there's a couple of things going on that might be undesirable. We have a little bit of a like a rotation twist going on here, and then it comes to a stop here. This is not this is actually a pretty good camera move, but there's a few things that we can do to improve this and fix some of the things that are undesirable that you may not know might be going on here. There's a few tools that haven't been introduced yet, but I'm going to introduce them to you to help you fix these camera moves pretty easily. Let's just run this right now. So this is running at 24 frames a second over here. Let's just look at this full screen. And the first thing is that I'm thinking is that, well, this is a pretty fast move. This is kind of zipping around pretty fast. And we may want to slow that down a little bit. And you're thinking, oh, man, what a pain in the neck that's going to be to slow this down. There's actually a pretty easy way that we can slow this camera move down and adjust it pretty easily. I've selected the camera. That's where the keyframes are. The camera is just selected, and it is keyframed here. You can see down in the timeline here, and it's 120 frames, which is 5 seconds at 24 frames a second. I'm going to extend this. I'm going to extend this to 10 seconds, so I'm going to make it twice as long. So let's just make this 240 frames, and we're going to have a 10-second camera move here. As you can see, the keyframes are only going halfway through the timeline, and what I essentially want to do is extend this all the way out. There's a few ways we can do this, and I'm going to just show you one way. We can do it in the timeline, but we can also use a really handy tool called the Dope Sheet. And if we go to Window, Animation Editors, Dope Sheet, what this is just an editor, and I'm going to press A to show you, to expand out the window here. And let's just expand this out, make this a little bigger. And what this is showing the keyframes of this object that I have selected. It also shows you all the keyframes in the scene, but it also shows, here's the camera, the render cam, and it shows you all of the keyframes on this line here, and they correspond with the keyframes down in the timeline that we have down here. Okay, so essentially what we can do is we can edit these keyframes in the Dope Sheet. We can edit multiple objects and things like that, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to navigate down. I'm going to shrink this down, so I'm holding down the Alt key and let's see, the middle mouse and left mouse button, and I'm just kind of shrinking it down like that a little bit, like that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag select all of those keyframes. So all of these keyframes are selected, and they're the same as the timeline. If I press the W, which is the translate, the move key, and I go into the Dope Sheet and middle mouse drag, I can move those keyframes around. See how they moved? Z undo, and I can move them, oops, anywhere in the timeline here. So you can see that if I'm moving it back in time, I can essentially, you can see it update here in the window. So I'm going to just, I'm going to undo that. So I have these selected, and I'm going to press the R key, which is the scale key. And it gives me this box here where I can scale these keys out. So I'm going to move them. I'm just going to scale them, and they're actually moving in the timeline. I'm going to move them on both ends so they move equally. So I'm going to spread them out, and then I'm going to press the W for the translate. And I have my mouse is a little broken here, so I'm going to move them back to 1, like that. And so I've essentially just stretched these out. Let's just do a little bit more. Oops, drag select, and I'm going to left mouse move those, and let's just do a little bit less, and then I'm going to move it on this end and then just move them out that way. So I'm almost going to the end of the frame here, but it starts at frame 1 and it goes to 230. So I've essentially made that camera move twice as long or slower. Now, one thing to look at here, this is what happens when you scale keys, and you have to be aware of. It's not really a serious thing, but it can mess you up a little bit. If I toggle through these keys, oh, it didn't look like this happened. Sometimes we get integer keys, and you'll see that the keys will not be, they'll be on 86.2 frames, and it'll be at 118.5 frames or whatnot. So a good thing to do before, when you're all done, is you have all the keys selected and you go up into edit in your dope sheet and just snap them, and those will just snap those keys right onto the keyframe, onto the whole number of frames here. So we're done with the dope sheet here, and now if we were to go and look at our animation now, frame 1, you can see that it's a little slower. It's actually kind of at a nice looking pace here. And we've done a nice looking animation. We didn't have to redo anything. We just kept the camera move that you had here and just made it longer. Very quickly, you can also do the same thing in the timeline. If I were to shift and select here, I'm going to go just back a little bit so I can shift select this key here. If I were to shift select all of those keys in the timeline, and I can also, if you grab, like there's a little arrow here in the red, and you can scale your keys out that way, similar to what I did in the dope sheet. And you can definitely, that's just another similar way to do your to scale your keys and to spread your keys out. Now you can see here's I have integer keys. You can look and it says 100 frame 146.70. If I go to this keyframe, I'm just toggling with the commas and the period keys to hit the keyframes, and it's not on whole number keys. So what I need to do is I need to select all those keys in the timeline. I shift select so it's red, and I can right mouse over in the timeline and go to snap, and that will put my keyframes back on whole numbers. That's a little bit of an advanced technique here, but I think once you get used to it, you'll be using it a lot. Okay, so let's go and let's fix some of these little things that are happening in our camera move here. And what's going on is that there's some rotations that are conflicting with each other. And so what we can do is that you could go in and try to just move the camera or whatnot, but there's another tool that I like to use a lot, and you should be using this if you're doing any kind of animation at all. There's a tool called, and it's the window, and it's the graph editor. So it's window animation editors, and it's the graph editor. And what this is, and I'm just going to select it and press A in that window, and that focuses all the keys into the window. And what this does is it shows you a representation of the movement that's going on in the form of curves. Maya moves objects and animates objects using curves, and you can manipulate these curves. And I see that you have some tangents, you have some flat tangents here, and you have some flat tangents there, which is very good. So it gives you that ease in and ease out. But what's going on here is that there's some conflicting motion going on in some of these. In this, especially here where it gets to this point here, and you can see it happening. So let's see if we can make this a little more obvious and look at this is the timeline, this is the frame we're on, there's the curve. And let's just toggle through here, and you can see what's going on. So there's a twist going on here, and what that is that one of the both of these rotations are kind of working against each other. So let's just look at the rotate. The translate is fine, but the rotate is what matters here. And let's look at our let's go into here. Again, I have to apologize. My mouse is doing some crazy things. I have to get a new mouse. So it sometimes jumps around like this. So this is what's going on. This is your camera. If you press F, it'll focus on the camera in the scene. And it's doing a little twist thing here. Here's something to be aware of. Over here in our tool, in our move tool, our rotate tools and our move tools, let's double click on the rotate tool. Now often what happens is that you work in local mode, and what that is that each one of these axes of rotation are oriented either by the object itself, by the world, which is XYZ in the world, or by gimbal. And gimbal is the actual way that any object in Maya will rotate in X, Y, or Z. So if you look at local is moving this way, and this way. But we want to look at it in gimbal, and if I press it in gimbal mode, you'll notice that it's changed. And this is what's actually going on. And let's get a little bit closer. So what's going on here in gimbal mode is that some of these rotations, even though it seems like in local mode that they're all straight, they actually aren't straight. And I don't, this is sort of a hard concept to maybe wrap your brain around right now, but it's just something to be aware of what's going on. So I'm going to make sure that I put my object in gimbal mode in the tool settings. And we don't have to think about that right now. What we're going to do is we're going to look at it in both of these modes here, and I'm going to go and I'm going to adjust each one of these axes one at a time. So let's take the rotate X axis, and I'm going to select the last keyframe, press Shift, and we're going to move it down and see what happens. Look what happens here. Okay, so this camera is moving around on the x-axis given this curve. So let's go to rotate Z and see what happens. And again, it's rotating in these kind of these odd manners. So let's undo that. So what I'm going to do, and let's look at the rotate Y here. And the rotate Y here is moving on this axis too. Okay, so let's first start with the rotate X, and I'm just going to zero that out. I'm going to bring it down flat. I'm just eyeballing it. I'm going to go to the rotate Z, and I'm going to flatten that out too. I'm just going to bring it down. Okay, so this is what I did. I'm going to do that again just so you see what happened. And I could actually do these at the same time. Press Control, rotate Z, rotate X. I could do these all at the same time, and I'm just kind of basically zeroing that out. So there isn't a movement there. There isn't a motion on that axis of the of our camera animation. Gotta excuse me, I'm working and talking at the same time, so sometimes I have to sort of pause here. Okay, so I've flattened those curves out. I've basically gotten rid of the animation on those curves there. But if you look here, let's look at our animation. It's not doing what we want it to do.